We are now live and you may begin.
Great. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Thursday, October 15th Planning Commission meeting. This meeting will be conducted utilizing teleconference communications, will be recorded for live streaming in accordance with the State of California Executive Order N29-20. All City of Sierra Madre public meetings will be solely available via live streaming and made available on the city's official website. With that, let's have a roll call, please.
Chair Dennison,
Here.
Vice Chair Catalano,
Here.
Commissioners Dallas,
Here.
Hutt,
Here.
Pevsner, and Spears.
Present.
Next up is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion?
Also move. Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Nay. All right, carries unanimously. Next will be the approval of minutes. Are there any edits that anybody would like to submit on the minutes?
I have a couple.
Carry on.
If you will, on line 57, it refers to Mr. Hutt as Chair Hutt, and on line 68 then reverts to his being Commissioner Hutt. I'm not sure whether you're being called chair because you're chair of the subcommittee, or there's just some confusion. Which one should we call him? They're right next to each other, so it's a little obvious. Should we, between 57 and 68, should we call him chair or commissioner?
Let's just call him Commissioner.
All right, what's the next one?
That's all I had.
Any other changes anybody recommends?
You already stole my thunder, so I'm good.
All right, with that, I will look for a motion to accept the minutes with corrections.
So moved. I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next, we have our council liaison report. Mayor Capocha.
You're on mute, Mayor.
Okay, thank you guys for tackling the commercial code. I believe the council was really pleased with the outcome at Tuesday's meeting. And just appreciate what you're doing with this one. This one is certainly a lot tougher than I thought it was going to be. So just appreciate the thoroughness and all to staff for giving us so many options to look at here to try to achieve the objectives that we've laid out. So I just certainly didn't realize it was this complex, and just again, thank you for tackling it. And I'm sure we're going to get to a good place when it's all done. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is community input. You can have the number put up there. At this time, any person may address the Planning Commission concerning an item that is not on the agenda. The Commission welcomes your participation. When addressing the Commission, please begin by providing your name and address for the record. Please keep comments to no more than 5 minutes to assure an orderly and timely meeting. Copies of the agenda are available online. State legislation limits the Commission's ability to take on specific requests. Government Code Section 54954.2 limits the placement of items on the agenda for action 72 hours prior to meetings, except for specific findings. No action or discussion may be undertaken by the Planning Commission on any item if not posted on the agenda, except that commissioners or staff may briefly respond to statements made or questions posed by the public, or a commissioner or staff liaison may ask a question for clarification or make a brief report of his or her own activities. A commissioner or the commission itself may provide a reference to staff to report back to the commission at a subsequent meeting. concerning any matter or may direct staff to place a matter of business on a future agenda. Do we have anybody waiting to participate?
At this point, you do not have any callers for community input.
All right, thank you. If they do call through in the next minute or two, please do not hesitate to let us know.
Will do.
Next up is the public hearing, amendments to the municipal code to streamline the design review process. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission conduct a public hearing to consider the alternatives provided in the staff report and adopt a resolution recommending to the City Council the best means by which to achieve the City Council's objective of streamlining the design review process.
Thank you, Chair. So the commission has discussed the design review process at 5 subsequent meetings, the most recent being the October 1st meeting representing the last discussion. Tonight, the Planning Commission is conducting a public hearing, as was just read, to consider the amendments of Chapter 17.20 Residential, 17.48 Development Standards, and Section 17.60.41 Design Review Permit. And also an additional Section 17.60.058 projects with multiple applications that was more recently added. And all of the red line documents are contained in exhibits B, C, D, and E in your packets. With the chair concurrence, since we do have quite a bit of information that we need to cover today, I wanted to suggest that we review the updated memo from the subcommittee to the City Council first, and then we can go ahead and review the edits from our October 1st meeting. And specifically, that was in Section 17.20.027 Design Review Permit. And then go on to some of the other edits, and we'll discuss those.
Or I could record it.
And then tackle the alternatives and see how we want to proceed with that.
Let me ask you this. Is the letter that we're going to be considering predicated on all of the decisions that we will be looking at?
So I would defer to Commissioner Hutt. We have looked at this once before. I don't know if you want, Commissioner Hutt, if you wanted to do this in open session, or we've sent this to each of you already. And if you were seeking comment during this time from the rest of the commissioners.
Yeah, I think, if we want to review this as we go through the alternatives, that's fine. But just to clarify what this is we took the memo that the subcommittee sent to the Planning Commission, and we revised it to be a memo from the Planning Commission to the City Council. We changed some of the items to clarify on changes that the Planning Commission wanted from the subcommittee draft. And we also took out some of the specific references to proposed staff findings because those have changed over time and they weren't clear anymore. So we just said staff had proposed this and we incorporated it and whatnot. What we didn't do was try to do anything other than explain.
Hey, look who's there.
So there's not like, we think this is the way to go because of blah, blah, blah. We thought really that is a kind of concept that would be better for each commissioner to discuss in this meeting. And then also if any commissioners wanted to, they could send an email or a letter or go to the City Council meeting or speak online if it's an online meeting, rather than trying to bake that into a memo. So the memo is pretty dry and pretty much is just, consistency edits to bring it from what we've seen before to be what it would be as explaining the changes that are in the resolution to the City Council.
Okay. All right. I will defer to Director Gonzalez on the order that he wants to take it. in light of the meeting earlier this week, I do have some thoughts, and maybe I'll offer those up as another alternative when we get to the alternative section. So I'll hold off.
Okay, so why don't we go through the first section? I'm going to pull it up on screen in 1 second. So actually, let me back up. This is attachment B. So here's attachment A. I've highlighted it here. And basically, I was going to pull up the staff report. I think it's easier to read in the staff report. But the major change here, we increased the gross floor area for all structures for new construction and or addition from 80 to 90% for gross floor area. And also we bumped that up for anything over 2,500 square feet to from 90 to 95%. So I just wanted to show where these changes were taking place. And if we don't have any comments on this, we can move forward. So hearing none, I'm going to go to the next section.
Just to reflect on what we spoke at the last meeting, when we compared those numbers to the spreadsheet, it saved one house coming before the design review procedure.
Right.
The rest of the houses would have still gone to the design review procedure.
I think we actually, on the matrix that we looked at the last week, that's what we said. There was one, I believe, that actually all get captured. It would still all get captured. So the next item that I wanted to share so this is section 17.20. This is the staff report. So this is a little easier to read than looking at the actual text in Exhibit A. But as you can see here, new construction or addition less than or equal to 2,500 square feet would be permitted by right. And then new construction, yes.
And just to clarify that, the under 2,500 isn't permitted of right. It just means that there's not a design review permit required. Correct. So if it went over 90%, it would still require an administrative design review permit.
Okay.
But even if it were 98%, say, it wouldn't require a design review permit.
Okay, that's good clarification. Let me move on to the next one. So there's that was A. I'm having difficulty. I queued a lot of these up and they are not here. So what I'm going to have to do, if you hold on. Let me go to the staff report then. So here we are. So in this section, we didn't get an opportunity to go through this section in any detail. The front yard decorative features, this is in 17.48130, walls and fences, front yard decorative features. And the way the code is written, it talks about less than 10 feet in height and width, but we did not refer to a depth measurement. If we were looking at this as an example entry arbor, do we want to specify a specific width and depth? This is only regulating 10 feet in height, less than 10 feet in height.
I think a depth of like 3 feet would be much more appropriate than 10 feet. 10 feet would almost make it like a building. But
I was just going to say that it makes it like a structure.
with a bench and stuff. You can do that.
Yeah, I sort of feel like there's not a need to really regulate the depth because a decorative feature in and of itself is not a building. And so if you're trying to claim that a storage shed in your front yard is a decorative feature, that's just not what it's meant to be. I don't know. I don't have strong feelings on this one way or the other, but it seems to me that the height and width are the more important measurements. And I think that the, director could interpret that. If we want to put in a depth, we can. I guess one of the concerns I have is, if you put in 3 feet and it's 3.5 feet, then it just seems like, oh, now they have to go get the permit. I feel comfortable just leaving that to the director's discretion on defining what a decorative feature is.
Would a trellis, say you have a trellis for a wisteria vine in front of your house that covers the walkway from the sidewalk to your front door, does this fall underneath that? I mean, it could be 10 feet, but it would go the entire way? Because I think we have houses in town that have that kind of feature in front.
Yeah, one other thing to consider is this regulation only affects the front yard setback area. So to the extent it's behind the front setback, which is typically 25 feet, that part is not regulated by this, and it would be there. It would be considered an awning, right? So it wouldn't regulate that. I guess if you started this, 10 feet back, you'd have a potential to do something 15 feet long. So I don't know, maybe depth makes sense, but I don't know.
We're getting very touchy here about all the different ways that people could game on us and game on the regulations. Okay, I mean, we got to give it up at a certain point here.
Yeah, and that's why I thought, it says decorative features. It doesn't say buildings. And I think if somebody tried to come in, the director could say, that's not a decorative feature. That doesn't make sense.
Sometimes Vincent just has to look somebody in the eye and say, "You got to be kidding me." Okay, that's not a decorative feature. That's a building. Okay?
Yeah, and
it's up to the guy. It's just up to the guy at the counter sometimes.
All right, so we have consensus that we're not going to add a depth. Is that what we're hearing?
Fine.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, so what I wanted to do is quickly go through the alternatives. So we can discuss them if need be. So we have, as indicated earlier, there are a total of 9 alternatives. Alternative 1 is to retain the code as currently codified. And in this case, what would occur is we would basically no longer have design review process. That would be contrary to the direction provided by the City Council to streamline the design review process, though. So I don't think this is something that we're going to have much more consideration on this one, retain the code. So we're basically retaining the code as currently codified without doing anything further. The second one was the repeal design review permit process. And this is the option where discretionary review, either by the director or planning commission, would no longer occur. Alternative number 3 is to repeal the design review process as it applies only to residential zones, which would be would impact the R1, R3, and RC zones specifically that require design review permits. And number 4, the design review subcommittee, basically we would approve the Planning Commission resolution number 2014 as amended by the full commission. And number 5, it's going to be a ways down here. There we are. We could also approve the Planning Commission resolution with the reviewing authority's recommendations. So if you wanted to make additional amendments to what we've already discussed in the past of this evening, you could include those in your resolution 2014 as number 5. And let me skip over to number 6. Here, approve resolution 2015 with staff's proposed design review findings. So in your packet, you have 2 resolutions, a Planning Commission resolution and a second Planning Commission resolution, but that includes the design review findings that we had discussed at our last meeting. We did make some changes to that. They are included in the staff report and also in your packet. So resolution would be to adopt resolution 2015 with staff proposed design review findings. And then I'm skipping down to page 13. And that is alternative number 7, approved with modifications, resolution 2014 to include the design elements as described above by staff. So what you can do is incorporate the design review findings, which was resolution 2015, extract that and put it in place into resolution 2014 as alternative 7. Alternative 8 is to approve resolution 2016, amending design review authority. We haven't discussed this at all. And this would be subject to administrative design review by staff with appeal to Planning Commission and City Council. So by amending the thresholds, and we can go through those here, it would eliminate ministerial review by the commission unless by appeal, under appeal. And all design review would be done administratively by staff. And that was the languages that was included here. And the final one, number 9, is approved with modifications, resolution 2014 to include design review by staff. So you can modify this language if you so chose to select alternative 8.
Now, out of all of those, Vincent, in the course of our work, there were certain modifications that we made to design, that we proposed for design review findings that just tweaked certain language, but the city attorney on the during the meeting had remarked that those were not going to be substantively modifying our design review findings. So it wouldn't be found that we had changed our design review findings. Can you identify which one which ones of those, because that's a very pivotal point in what we're talking about here, I believe. So out of all of the alternatives, can you identify which ones of those are categorically not substantive changes to design review findings, and which ones are?
Let me see if I understand the question that you're asking, Joe, or Commissioner Vice Chair Catalano.
It's okay, I'm Joe. It's all right.
It sounds like what you're asking is, and I think that I'm translating this correctly, is that 20-14 is the Planning Commission put forth versions that did not change design review to a point to trigger the 330.
That's correct.
2015 is the one that used the new version of design review that was put forth by staff. And 2016 is the newly introduced one that would repeal or delegate design review to ministerial across the board. Do I have that right, Director Gonzalez?
That's correct.
So in other words, it's only the 2014s that actually keep us immune to 330. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
But just
Actually, wait, that's not correct.
not entirely.
Yeah, the last two, they only change, they keep the findings the same. They only change who the reviewing body is. So when you make everything administrative and subject to ministerial review, you're not changing the findings. You're only making them subject to.
Who finds it?
That's in the 16, right?
Right. But just to be clear, we're not talking about making these ministerial findings. They're still discretionary. It's just staff level.
Yeah, how do you call that discretionary?
Right, it's discretionary.
Unlike a building permit, that if you meet the building code, the staff has to approve that. There's no discretion at all in there. So it's still discretionary, it's just at staff level.
Right.
Good clarification, thank you.
I thought that was called ministerial myself.
No, there's two issues, ministerial versus discretionary, and then the level of review. So it's like a grid. We just don't do any ministerial, but staff does discretionary and ministerial.
I see. Okay.
Yep.
Never would have imagined that.
All right.
So essentially what we're going to be doing is the commission will be entertaining your desire to forward a recommendation to the city council using one of those or multiple of those alternatives. So I will open it up to the commission for discussion at this point.
So I would like to hop in here and share some stuff. I did attend the city council meeting on Tuesday, and I'd like to share with you, in case you didn't catch it, what my synopsis of that was. They received a report from staff that made no recommendations, which is out of the ordinary. Generally, staff makes some kind of a recommendation. They received a report that said, here is what the Planning Commission put forth, and here are footnotes as to where the recommendations that they gave were different than what City Council had directed the commission to do. They went through and recommended that staff repeal the vast majority of the changes that we submitted, that the Planning Commission submitted, that were not consistent with the direction that they had given. They took the time to be very thoughtful about each of those, and including while they had given direction to remove the prime storefront, they ended up leaving that concept in with the direction to staff to simply remove the conditional use permit upon change. So they did listen to the code that we put forth, and they did in spite of that being something they had told us to completely remove, they did keep the concept in there in a slightly different version. This was a great opportunity for us to see what the report will look like that they receive when we put all of this forward to them. They will receive a similar report that says, here is what the Planning Commission put forth. Here is what the direction at the City Council was. And here are where it does not meet those criteria that they put forth. They further thought that the Planning Commission had not gone as far as it could towards making it easy to do business here, and used a data-driven decision to determine that they requested, I believe it was 5,000 square feet and below. Is that right, Vincent? That would not require any kind of a permit? Was it 5 or 7,500?
7,500 square feet.
7,500. Anything in the commercial zone below 7,500 that is an existing business that changes uses will not need any kind of a permit. So I think we have a very unique opportunity here. We have a little bit of a crystal ball as to what it is that the City Council will have as their options as they go forward. They were not able to do the first reading of the code because they've requested that staff go back and make those changes. They were enough changes that the code was not able to be read for the first time there. So staff will bring back to them the changes that they recommended, and they will make their determination that those changes are in fact what they want or not what they want. But they've clearly indicated, and this was multiple council members that indicated that the items that were pointed out by staff were not consistent with the direction that they had given. And they wanted to stick the vast majority outside of the modification of the prime storefront to their direction. And so I pondered this and think that we have an interesting opportunity here where we have seen what will be the process in the next go round that has a significantly, and some of the other, they asked that all of the manufacturing code simply be removed. Anything that was not, some of the changes we had added in that were cleanups of other parts, those were mostly recommended to be removed because it was not what they had directed us to do. So I feel like we have a great opportunity here to see exactly the process that is likely to be repeated as we go forward, and use that to really formulate the way that what it is that we want to present to the City Council here.
So do you think that, is it your estimation based on this, is it your estimation that right now they're primarily interested in an overall streamlining of the process or getting rid of design review findings? We could be weighted one way or the other here. I want to know what your feeling is based on this.
My feeling was that they went out of their way to make the process as easy as possible by making the threshold at which you had to have a permit higher than any of us probably thought they would do. I'm sorry. It was higher than I expected, but I think that it was a great view into what will be an option that they look at going forward. I am not going to offer an opinion as to what the City Council will do because that is the City Council's choice to make. And I certainly won't make that guess. With the frame of reference of looking at the City Council meeting and the decisions that they made, my personal recommendation is that I think that everybody wants to keep the design review process intact for very large buildings in town. I think that the way that we have the best opportunity of setting it up so that the council agrees with our recommendation is to ease the thresholds before which you are actually subject to it. If we look at the data-driven decision that they made at the council meeting, Councilman Harabedian was very careful to get the numbers as to how many units were at each of the different thresholds. And he used that data to show that it was down to, I think, 7 or 13% of all the commercial buildings that would even qualify for a conditional use permit. And so if we take that logic and look at the thresholds that we have proposed so far, those thresholds did not relieve but 1 or 2 of the last 24 houses that have come before design review. I suspect that if we do not make a change that helps to modify that volume of the volume of houses that come before us, that it simply won't be considered, or it will be modified to something that isn't our recommendation.
So then, you know, we all know that there is this issue coming up of a major proposed development in town. Is that threshold likely to be just shy of what the smallest of one of these houses is going to be? Or is our threshold really going to allow us to look at the development as such? I mean,
my understanding is that would be
killed? Are we going to get knocked out of the box on specific plan review as a result of this?
My understanding, and this I'll need some help from the director or the deputy city attorney, but my understanding is that because it's a specific plan, it will come before us no matter what. Is that accurate?
Yeah,
Alex? Vincent?
yes, it would.
And when it comes before us, if the design review findings, for instance, have been completely thrown out for assuming, like, for individual buildings, will that create a limitation for us in terms of what we have to say about it when it comes before us? And the reason I'm mentioning this, look, is not because I'm interested particularly in what the exterior decoration of any one of those given houses is going to look like, all right? But there's a different level of decision making that has to do with the overall aggregation, the layout of the 40 houses, what the entire thing is like as a development. There are design issues there that are extremely important to our town, and that's really why I'm asking that. It has much less to do with whether the shutters are proportionately right on the front. I really don't care too much about that. So I just want to make sure that we're not going to get like totally, totally hamstrung by the.
Yeah. So I guess Director Gonzalez, what are the standards as to what we would be judging when we do the specific plan?
So you're talking about the downtown specific plan?
Sorry, no. If the monastery comes before the planning
Now, the
commission.
monastery, we wouldn't apply these design review findings. It'll have its own design guidelines through that specific plan.
So regardless of what we do here to design review, it's completely different when we see the monastery specific plan.
Right.
Well, that's one option. Clearly, in the specific plan, any new design review findings would have to be objective because SB 330 would apply. But to the extent we just applied current zoning, our current findings would apply. So to the extent we tried to bundle it all up in a specific plan, then we would have new findings, and all those findings, because they would be post SB 330, would have to be objective. So one option is just to take design review out of the specific plan and leave it with our current findings.
Hey, and you know, we have not, well, we've been doing all this other work. We really haven't like looked comprehensively at what a set of quote unquote objective design standards would be anyway. We're still way far away from that.
Chair Dennison, can I comment on the potential monastery project?
Absolutely, sir.
Give you my understanding, and I just want to assure the Planning Commission that what we're trying to achieve here has nothing to do with that. My understanding is this is with the monastery, it's basically a negotiation. So in other words, we're going to have to make a determination. They're putting forth a project, and we're going to decide if that is acceptable in return to change the zoning to allow them to do this. So it's kind of a package deal. So I just don't really see this applying. And again, City Attorney, if you want to jump in on that, but that's completely separate from what we're trying to do here. That's a project in itself. And, you know, it's going to come before the Planning Commission, and there is going to be comment on the design of it overall. I really am hoping that we don't go down to the level where you guys are working on every single house and the specific design on that. I'm thinking it's more of a general case, but that's just my thought about it. And I don't think we're thinking about this at all in terms of what we're trying to do here.
And that project will be subject to a development agreement. And the development, it depends really how we go about it. So there, like Commissioner Hutt said, there's multiple ways to go about it. But the development agreement could incorporate some of those design elements as well. So it remains to be seen, but like the mayor said, it's going to be more contractual than the ordinary project that comes before the city.
Okay, I was primarily concerned as to you know what we're doing here now with respect to these ordinances, what kind of effect it may or may not have when when a whole bundle, a development of 40-some buildings comes before us. Whether that would be like, oh, that's way over the threshold. You know, we don't want to hear that. So, all right, well, thanks for the clarification on that.
So I guess,
Chair Dennison, I have a question.
yes, sir.
The Planning Commission has worked in its resolutions to change thresholds and modify some of what we choose to find on and what we choose to review. Are you telling us that that work that we have done should be jettisoned, and we should go even be more generous?
I am saying that the work that we did in changing the thresholds, when we looked at that spreadsheet at the last meeting, it clearly showed that the thresholds that we changed to would not have alleviated design review in but I think 2 of the houses that we've seen in the last 3 years. And so I suspect that changing the thresholds to either of the sets that we proposed isn't going to be enough to get it over the goal line.
So do you have a proposal?
Commissioner Hutt, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think there's one distinction to be drawn between the discussion of the commercial code, which was really in a large measure about making it easier for businesses to locate in existing buildings. And so we were looking at the sizes of existing buildings versus here, what we're talking about development projects that haven't been figured out yet. And I think one of the issues that we have under our current code is because we capture every second story with a full design review permit. Once you're already over that threshold, you might as well just max out the size of your project. And that was, a concern I had a long time ago from the get-go on these. And so I think it's a little unfair to take this set and say, well, we wouldn't provide relief when this set is responsive to the thresholds we have now. And so if we adopt new thresholds, I think you're going to find a lot of people build to those thresholds. And you're going to have people who do a second story that is 75% because that's what you can do without going to the planning commission. And you'll be at 3,499 square feet or whatever the limit is that you can do to get by without doing that. So it's a good point, but it's not entirely apples to apples comparison.
That's fair. And I guess a counter case to that might be a recent house that we approved, that while we often say we want an articulated second story, and we don't want it to be a rectangle on top of a rectangle, we approved a rectangle on top of a rectangle that was literally 100% of the bottom story. And so if we're going to approve a second story that's 100% of the first story, why is it that we're requiring them to come before the planning commission so that we can say yay to something that we've already said you can do?
Well, I think.
Hello?
Oh, go ahead.
So the only one I want to make a comment and ask a question. One, the comment is, I think you said the data the last 3 years. If that's correct, I can remember back, more than 3 years where we had, I would say in the last 3 years, we haven't had egregious projects in terms of size and threshold limits that we've been challenged with in the past. So I don't even know that the data they're drawing from is a very good comparison or something to draw conclusions from, because we've already seen reduced projects. And so I think the criteria and some of the thresholds we've created will do probably what John is saying, and we'll just get people to look at those thresholds, because that's what really ends up happening. I can think of a house up on Auburn that created a lot of controversy, which was huge. But if you look at the way it was built and the amount of square footage based on the lot size, what we approved made sense. And even with that, we got them to modify the original design. So I think that some of that last 3 review data-driven stuff is, maybe they should take, a longer review. But I think in the big picture, just changing the thresholds will actually get us what we want. My question was, of the possible options we have, which one leaves us? Some of the options almost leave us nothing to review. Which one leaves us, I don't want to say the most, but maybe the most of what we've been normally accustomed to reviewing? It seems like the one where we keep Resolution 2014. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's a question I have about how to figure out what we should recommend to the city council.
Well, the one that would keep it the most the same is alternate 1, which is retain the code as currently codified, right?
Yeah, but that's not, I don't think that's in the pictures.
I'm not coming here saying that one of these choices is the best. I'm saying, and I agree with your point, Commissioner Hutt, that often people will build right up to the line, but we don't see houses that build right up to the line. We see houses that build above the line, because if you build right up to the line, you don't come before us.
Yep, that's right.
It's the way it is. If you drive 50, 55, you don't get pulled over, okay? I'm not going to drive 50 just because of that.
It's funny you say that. A police officer just lit up his lights across the street. So good question. And unfortunately, Commissioner Spears, you caught me. I prefer to bring alternatives rather than just, challenges. One of the things that, if that's the road that the commission thought we should explore, then I think that we have tools to look at as far as where the design review process would kick in, being significantly higher than it is now. That would get some of the houses that, as Commissioner Hutt pointed out, were probably just over the line because of where the line was. I don't know. We have a lot of choices in front of us, 9. And if we talked about changing the thresholds, 10. My concern was, I think that the city council has been very clear as to what they are looking for from us. And I think that we all feel fairly passionately that we want to keep some form of design review. And so I'm trying to find the middle ground that allows all of that. I'm not recommending jettisoning all of 2014. I think that there's a ton of elegant code in there that shouldn't be thrown away. I just wanted to bring forward the crystal ball that we had earlier this week as to how they will receive their report and what actions they took.
Can I add something here about, if they're looking at, well, what's the impact in terms of the number of a number of projects that have come before you that have been rejected for X, Y, or Z, and in trying to weigh these different alternatives in terms of how many of those projects would have been relieved of having to buy a variance. I want to offer something else in here that really, my time on the commission has affected those numbers, as small as they are, has affected those numbers just as much. And it has nothing to do with what we're all talking about here. And actually, if the mayor is still listening, I hope, John, I hope that you as a retired engineering manager will consider this. We have just put into our tweaking of the design review findings under, recommended additional information for design review that a civil engineer sign off. Now you've heard me talk about this a little bit before, but I want to review it right now. Okay, in an awful lot of jurisdictions, you don't even get to its baseline information that your site has been reviewed and that a civil engineer is of record and is inputting on the overall design of the site. There are a lot of cities that just say, well, that's a normal part of by the time you get to design review, by the time you get to this point in your design process, you've got to have your civil engineer on board because we don't want any problems with the grading here. All right. Now, so we're way behind the curve on that compared to other cities, and I think there have been at least 3 while I'm on the commission that have just been sent away because it was obvious to me as an architect and obvious to some of you too that there were like great big errors or omissions in the grading and the site design that really affected our ability to be able to make a good decision. So, you know, without even fooling with any of this other stuff, if we only we only were to require, like a lot of other cities do, that either there was a civil engineer or that the architect in his drawings, if it was very minor, would be responsible for these grading issues, then they'd be there, okay? And I do not expect that a planner, especially a junior planner at the counter, has been trained like a civil engineer to understand all of this. This is why we have a consulting civil engineer for the city. Kev, we could, without having to compromise any of our stuff with regards to design review findings, that if we simply did what other cities did in terms of incorporating the civil engineering, the grading at the point at which these submissions are made, I think that we would cut in half the projects that had to come before us. Or if they came before us, they wouldn't be getting sent back for things that are simple and obvious.
So
now, can we just include that requirement up front for everybody, and you know, and like we can have a big impact there, and stop fooling with this other stuff.
Yeah. Thank you, Vice Chair Catalano. And I think that that's something that we can talk about once we have some direction here, because that's actually embedded in the code. That's part of just after the findings. So maybe to keep us, I know we have to get this done today. So I guess I would ask that we figure out if there is some current on the commission as to which of the 9 presented options or alternatives, or if we want to explore something else. So I guess.
Do we have the time to explore anything else?
If we resolve it today, we have all the time in the world. We have to prepare something that we can present to them, or they have, the city council, as you know, presented us that letter that if we don't present them something that they can act on, that they will take action of their own. And so if we don't present them something or some sort of a plan to get to something, if that's what you're recommending, then I suspect that they will take action of their own, because they've said as much.
Commissioner Doughton, there you go.
Figured it out. I know the Planning Commission serves the council, and we've been appointed by the council to serve them. And I respect that, but we are here to serve them with our knowledge and our experience. And they're asking us to do streamline things a lot. And at some point, you have to stick with what you believe in best serves the town, and let the planning and let the city council decide what they want to do. That's what they've asked us to give our opinion on. And I would be really concerned on loosening things up a whole lot more than in the 2014, because things might get kind of unpleasant, both visually and amongst neighbors. So I really would like to make the council happy, but we have a responsibility to do our jobs as a planning commission. And the council's already kind of made it clear that they are not necessarily happy with the planning commission, has reduced it to 5 from 7. and wants to really rein in what we can give opinions on, to the point of one of them has us giving opinions on nothing, which is kind of interesting. So as a point of integrity, I would want to stick with what I thought was best for the town in this particular situation, and let the city council take responsibility for doing something otherwise. That's my 2 cents, and I'm willing to change my mind if somebody wants to argue with me or discuss it with me.
I tend to agree, because I know that, well, commercial, I think they're under pressure with commercial, because they're looking at a lot of empty storefronts, and they believe that, hey, we'll rent to anybody and let the businesses fail if they need to. But I have yet to hear them go into, I mean, when you talk about having them been data driven, you're looking at, well, of all the ones that have ruled on, or we have, commented on, we're going to change the number of ones that we have authority over from 2 to 5, or whatever it's going to be. And I think that doesn't take into account the quality of the design that's going to impact the community. That just says, well, we're going to cut back their work from 7 to 2, and that's going to, quote, solve the problem. I'm not sure that just by doing that, you're going to end up with the kind of development in Sierra Madre that people want, and that reflects the community and the community values. And so I'm a little concerned that the fact that they're data driven is at such a high level. I mean, they're looking at it from 50,000 feet. And this has been my complaint about the council in the past, is that they tend to gloss over a lot of things that the Planning Commission actually spends a great deal of time looking at and trying to craft something that is going to be appropriate for the community. And so in that regard, I agree with Commissioner Dallas that, we're giving this our best shot. I mean, 20-14 took a lot of work, and it took a lot of effort, and it was a good faith effort on our part to say, okay, we hear that you want us to be more permissive. How about if we modify the following items? How about if we, do the following things, and that will allow people to develop a little better and still give us some minor modicum of control over, what appears in our neighborhoods. So I tend to agree that, this is not something that we have, that we are just taking lightly. I mean, the commission has worked very hard to try to fulfill the council's request. And we're not getting any more serious direction or any more in-depth direction, because I don't think they look at it in greater depth. I think, that's our job. And so I guess they could dismiss everything and say, well, we're just going to let the director approve everything, and who knows what the planning commission has done. So, and I believe that, the reference to being cut from 7 to 5 is part of that. They just want less to do with us. So, at some point in time, I think we should probably say, hey, we worked hard, we tried to do what you wanted us to do. This is our best shot.
And I would like to add in there that there's also, to me, a very, very serious ethical issue in that SB 330 was created supposedly to alleviate problems and to expedite the approval of affordable housing and as a statewide initiative. And why should it be used? Why should it be misused, as far as I'm concerned, because the state just hit everybody with a big shotgun to interfere with our ability to have design review, because most of what we're reviewing here, I'll make it very, very brief, $1 million to $1.5 million houses don't have anything at all to do with the housing crisis in the state. And if you look at SB 330, it says right in the title of the title of the law, it does refer to quote unquote housing crisis. All right, we are not dealing with a housing crisis here. It's just not ethical at all to try to use this to interfere with the design review process that I think that most of the people in the city of Sierra Madre want to have.
Commissioners Hutt, Pevsner?
Yeah, I can chime in. I think that, you know, our job is to recommend. So I think we should recommend a code that we think is the right code for the town and tell why we think that is. And we should give that opinion and that information to the council so they can make an informed choice, because our job is to recommend. Yeah, I think that, you know, Commissioner Catalano, the concept of affordability, making it a lot easier to build really big houses is not going to help affordability. I think that's one of the things we added, where we were very explicit about second units not counting in the square footage for the thresholds, actually will help quite a bit with affordability. I think that as a developer and real estate attorney, I can tell you people build to the code. And so I know it's been an interpretation we've had on some applications that we're not going to count that, but that wasn't in the code and people didn't understand it. Property owners didn't understand it. So when a property owner can look at the code and see what they're faced with and see that they can, you know, do X, Y, and Z and have a full review, or they could cut down the size a little bit, or have a somewhat smaller second story, or do a second unit and get under those thresholds, I think quite a few of them will. If you just take the existing set, I don't think that's a fair comparison. And to the extent the houses are over 3,500 square feet, you know, I don't have any desire to increase a threshold higher than 3,500 square feet for commission review. I think that long ago we used to have that at 4,000, and many people in town said that was too high and they wanted to lower it to 3,000, and we compromised at 3,500. I don't have any desire to recommend a higher threshold on that, and I don't see on this list, you know, those sort of in-between houses that we would have caught because those people just lowered down to meet the current code. And what's going to happen is you're going to have a lot more people who will be able to do that. So I think this, as proposed, and I don't think it's magic or set in stone, and I would be happy to discuss any further revisions. But I think it works really well. And I also think it's a code that I could recommend, and it's the code I think that improves our current code. I mean, absent council direction for anything, if you just ask me, is our current code better or is this better? I think these provisions are better. I think they'll serve not only the neighbors and protect the neighbors, but they'll also serve the property owner better to have a lot of smaller projects go through easier and simpler without causing problems. And it'll also, to the goal of SB 330, you know, encourage more affordable units through the second unit, which is really the best we're going to get in this town. So my general thoughts.
Commissioner Pevsner?
Yeah, hello. So I'm just going to reiterate what I said. I see the gambit of having nothing to come to us, and then having maybe more than the city council would like. And I'm open to compromise. I don't really care. I just think that some of those thresholds we made were compromises enough, and we've already modified that. And if taking some things out of, you know, revision 1 in terms of the threshold, so that theoretically less stuff comes to us, that's fine. But I think at some point we need to maintain the design review that we have recommended and been to us through the city when we made of the whole general plan, you know, when we went through that whole process. The city council see, you know, they see something better, because in the current time, you know, that no longer applies, then fine, they can modify it as well. But so I'm not stuck on option 1 necessarily, but I would like to leave us something to review, and I think we can pick something more to closer to that rather than on the other end of the scale that leaves us nothing to review. Not that I don't trust the staff, but it sounds like that's sort of what they're asking us, to let us have stuff go over the counter more, which is fine. I just think we've made some compromises already.
Okay, so having heard all of that, maybe we can go through the list and whittle down the ones that we know we don't want. Unless I hear otherwise from anybody, I will cross off the list, retain the code as currently codified. Are we all in agreement?
I agree.
Kill it.
Okay.
Yeah, Chair, can I ask a procedural question? We have, what is it, 3 resolutions in front of us. Are we going to actually vote on each alternative? Or are we going to vote on each resolution? What is, how do we do this? I guess is my sort of general question.
I think that we have our choice. I think we need to put forth 1 resolution. And I think that we may be able to put forth 2. If we said that we wanted to, I think we can put forth anything we want, is my understanding. We should.
You can take a combination of resolutions. For instance, if you wanted to introduce the design review findings from 2015, you can incorporate them into 2014 as an amendment.
Okay, I guess, but if there's one resolution we like and one we don't like, do we vote on the one we don't like, or do we just ignore it? I guess that's.
I think we only have to approve the one that we want to put forward. Is that right, Deputy City Attorney? Yeah, we only have to approve the one we want to put forward.
In other words, somebody could put out there a motion that we're going to send up a number such and such, and that the others are going to be thrown out. It could be that simple. Is that correct? That
Yes.
if we had a motion, we all accepted that way?
Yes, we can specify that we don't want those other ones to go forward, or we can just specify the one that we want to go forward with whatever modifications, if any, we make.
Is it helpful if we actually vote on the alternative so that it can be recorded that we considered it and voted, as opposed to just, sending one thing up?
Is that
I don't
something
have
that
an answer on that. I'm just surmising.
Yeah, it's a good question. Director Gonzalez, if the Planning Commission voted on each one of the alternatives separately, is that something that would be included for the council?
We can certainly include that, yes.
It would be reflected in the minutes
Yes.
to the extent, I mean, I don't know that it would matter because you're still only recommending one, but your vote would be reflected in minutes.
Well,
Do you have a preference?
if we were going to entertain a motion in favor of one of them, that motion would, to complete its language, would include throwing out all the others anyway, right?
We can certainly include that. Yep. So I guess the next alternative was repeal the design review permit process. Was there anybody who wanted us to discuss that? Okay.
Nope.
I will cross it off the list. The alternate 3 was repeal the design review permit as it applies to residential development, R1, R3, and RC zones. Anybody who wants to discuss that? Okay. Alternate 3 has been removed. I'm going to skip down to number 9, approve with modifications PC Resolution 20-14 to include administrative design review authority by staff. This is the one, as I understand it, that delegates all of the design review to staff. Nope.
That's very dependent upon them hiring the right people to put on the staff. And as the person that's been on this commission for many years, I've seen people sit in that office, some of whom had skills and some of them who did not have skills. So I would not, I'd be very reticent to go ahead with that, because I think under the current administration with current staff, I'm fairly comfortable that the city would be well protected, but it leaves too much to chance.
Okay.
I agree with that.
All right, so we've removed 1, 2, 3, and 9 from the list. Left on the list are alternates 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Alternate 4 is approve resolution 20-14 as it was presented. Alternate 5 is approve resolution 2014 with our recommendations. To changes, I assume is what that means. Alternate 6 is approve resolution 2015 with staff's proposed design review findings. That's 2015, you'll remember, is the new set of objective design review standards put forth by staff. Alternate 7 is approve with modifications PC resolution 20-14 to include elements of design review findings. Director Gonzalez, does that mean that we would incorporate some of the 20-15 findings into the 20-14 amendment or resolution?
Some or all, yes.
Some or all, okay. And alternate 8 is approve resolution 20-16, amending the design review authority subject to administrative design review by staff with appeal to Planning Commission and City Council. Let's talk about that one. Was there anybody who jumped at that one and wanted to discuss that one?
So just so I understand, this one is basically 9, but there's an ability to appeal.
Yes.
You know, I think that this one has some intuitive interest for me. My concern here is that an appeal, I think it costs 25% or a third of the application cost. So if you're a neighbor and someone is doing this, in order to appeal, you have to have, spend hundreds of dollars to appeal. And so, that sort of is difficult, I think, because you've put a big cost on the neighbors. And I think if there were an ability for some escape mechanism that would allow that to be brought up without cost to the neighbors, if there was a petition that enough of them signed or something, I know that the city council can call something for review, planning commissioners can't. And I think we decided that doesn't work under city code or maybe state law even. So I don't know. I think there's, again, I think I have some interest here, but I don't think it really works. And I think the better way to do this is, again, to set the thresholds at a level that the ones that you'd intuitively think should go to the planning commission, go to the planning commission. And the ones that don't are reviewed at staff.
Okay, so it sounds like that one might be one of the ones that provides some middle ground. And so that one would be maybe keeping some of the work that the subcommittee has done in 2014, but adjusting the thresholds table such that up to a larger threshold would be directed to staff with the ability to appeal to Planning Commission. Is that what I'm piecing together?
Yes.
Commissioner Hutt?
Well, my concern again is that I think if there's an oddball once in a blue moon project that somebody has to appeal, and they have to pay a few $100 or even $1,000 depending on what it is, I think that's equitable because for the most part you get that level right. But if you push too much down to the staff level, then you're really putting a burden on the neighbors to appeal a bunch of stuff. And so unless we could craft some sort of better mechanism for appeal, I have heartburn with this. And so I guess the other issue that we're dealing with is we've got to solve this tonight. This is the first time we've heard of this concept. This might be better, better thought of as an idea to come back, circle back on at a later meeting after the city council has had a chance to see our recommendations.
And Director Gonzalez, just so we can clarify for the commission's benefit, I'm looking at the fee schedule now for fiscal year 2020-21. It says appeals are 75% of the original filing.
So it's much more costly than a few $100s.
Oh, it's much more costly than I thought. Well, then my heartburn goes up.
So what does it take to modify the fee schedule?
That's
City
done by
council,
city
city
council.
council
isn't it?
resolution.
So then that could be one of our recommendations that go with this, is that
Could,
the fee schedule be adjusted.
it could.
Okay.
You can hear the neighbors right now. I got rejected, but it was only by staff. But now they want X number of dollars for me to be able to go to the commission and have a hearing on it. And they're pretty annoyed that they've been rejected just by staff, quote unquote. So the city's just looking for more money. I don't think it's going to be a very popular thing at all.
Okay. I'm going to leave this one on the table for now, and we can come back and revisit it. Was there anyone who wanted to put forth Resolution 20-15, which is the staff recommended alternative modifying the design review findings to the more objective code?
Just to be clear, that's what we reviewed last meeting.
Yes.
And these new findings that staff put forward were, I'm not sure that they had the greatest depth that we might need. They were going to be compliant then with 330. Was that the goal for that, for those the standards?
Yes.
And yet we had references to other cities that were going to, have hundreds of pages of design review standards. So while, I don't doubt that staff made a good faith effort, I'm not quite comfortable with the depth in which we were presented, and if that's what we're going to be, that's what we're going to be locked in to live with forever. I'm not comfortable with us just going with that. I think that if we're actually going to adopt new design review standards, it's going to take many meetings and a lot of detail.
And I think, for clarification, that those separate cities were design guidelines that lived underneath the design review findings.
Yes.
Yeah, but how a quote unquote objective can they be if they're only guidelines?
Guidelines don't have to be objective.
Right. But guidelines are like setting the precedent, right? Here's the precedent of what it is that we can accept, and then that's okay.
Yeah, it's the city wish list.
And my concern is that some of the work that we've been doing up and now is based on experiences, and part of those experiences are the failures of our code to meet certain efforts by the citizens to build what they want. And we want, we've listened to complaints from people. Well, why is it this way? It needs to be other ways. And we've tried to modify our codes to take into account the concerns of the citizens. And if 2015 seems to jettison all that and start over with a new set. And while I'm appreciative of staff's effort, I'm not quite sure that it is based on all the experience that we've had to wrestle with.
Throw it out.
Okay. Okay. I have a question that's slightly off topic for the deputy city attorney. I know we've covered this previously. My little pea brain cannot remember all of the intimate details of this amazing legislation. If we remove individual findings by repealing individual findings but leaving the rest, does that leave the rest of them intact and immune from 330?
There is no way of knowing because we have no precedent for this.
Yeah.
But we're vulnerable, so I would recommend against it.
As Commissioner Hutt said, we could be the guinea pigs.
That's more, that leaves us with greater vulnerability than anything we're proposing. I mean, with 2015 is obviously opens us up to some vulnerability because we're amending the findings substantively, but also just changing one is I think would be the same deal.
Just repealing one.
Just repealing one likely would also subject us to potential challenge. So I'd recommend against it. If we can repeal one, we can do it, but we should make sure that the rest of them are also objective because it could subject the city to liability.
So then the idea of repealing, well, it wouldn't matter. If you're repealing the design review, it doesn't matter what the design review standards are because you've repealed it. And you're saying that changing who the reviewing body doesn't affect 330, it's changing the actual findings that you're using as a rubric?
Yeah, because changing the reviewing body is like changing the thresholds.
Okay.
It's not a substantive change, it's like a procedural change.
Bummer. Okay. So I guess the consensus seems to be with either 20-14 or adding potentially some level of 20-16 to 20-14. Meaning either 20-14 is the one that's been put forth by the subcommittee, or the alternate being take some parts of 20-16 where more of it, where we change the thresholds at which something comes before the planning commission, not whether or not it is reviewed. So how do we want to proceed?
I think we put a lot of work into the modifications to 2014 to make it easier, especially for the smaller projects, not the big mansion-y sort of things. And we should hold to that because that doesn't change the findings, but makes a lot of other accommodations.
Right. So I think that both ideas, the two paths, both have 2014 as their base. What taking some language from 2016 does is pushes some amount of that review process down to the director or to staff level rather than up to planning commission. So you retain those same standards, but they would be reviewed up to a higher threshold rather than by planning commission, but by staff. And then the high one, the really high ones or ones that get appealed would come up before the commission.
Is there a significant cost difference or time difference between the administrative review and the planning commission review?
Administrative design review is about $2,500, and commission review, design review is over 5,000.
Well, that's notable.
And obviously you have to get calendared, and I think I saw it's an average of 1.7 visits before us. So that could, although I don't know the timing of staff review versus planning commission.
It would probably save about a month and a half.
Are we talking about alternative 5 or 8 here?
We're talking about alternative 10, where we take the 2014 that we like, and we add some of 20-16 so that we continue to have the thresholds that we've already proposed in 20-14, which have lightened some of those thresholds, but we would change the thresholds at which it goes to staff versus before the commission.
I kind of like that idea, but I'm not sure what that would be.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I think that sounds like the right way to go.
But isn't that what we already did? I mean, we took a lot of the thresholds now that go to the planning commission, and we moved a lot of those down to staff level review. So
Sounds familiar to me.
I mean, what more do we want to move? The concept is fine, and I really like the concept, and that's why I think our proposal is better than the existing code, because things that have no business wasting their time coming before us don't have to. But I look at the thresholds that we proposed, and I don't see a threshold. I think, oh, that's too low. Let's raise that one up so we don't catch as much.
I have a question for Director Gonzalez. Alternate 5, which is the resolution 2014 with the reviewing authority's recommendations, that was added by you to address an issue that the applicants weren't getting clear feedback?
No, the alternate 5, the Planning Commission Resolution 2014, it's the same thing as if you wanted to make modifications to your current ordinances amended that we've been talking about, you would have the authority, and you can do that here if you were just going to amend the code that the commission had came up with.
So if I'm saying this correctly, alternate 4 is accepting 2014 as it was presented, and alternate 5 is making edits to 2014.
Correct.
So if we make edits here in this meeting, Commissioner Spears, then that would be number 5. If we leave it the way that it was presented to us, that would be number 4.
But I thought one of them incorporated the concept that if a application came to the planning commission would provide written comments.
Yeah.
And I don't know which. I'm sort of getting lost in which one it is, but that I mean, that's a concept that that again I have a lot of intuitive appeal to, because it provides clarity to an applicant. My concern with that concept is that how you do that with the Brown Act is sort of a tough thing to do, because we can't discuss a project until we are all in the meeting talking about it in real time. So it's hard to come up with a written set of directions to an applicant when we're just discussing it for the first time. So maybe there's an ability on that one to appoint a subcommittee or a liaison who can synthesize the comments of the the commission after the meeting. But I just don't see how it's workable in a meeting to hear an application and then also produce written direction.
So what I thought I read, the written would come from staff based on the commission's review, and I like the idea that the applicant gets detailed feedback, because we have both been frustrated by applicants that show up at the next meeting and they haven't addressed the issue that we brought up the last time. But I mean, so there may be a way in which number 5 addresses the needs of the applicant and helps them better to figure out what, how to proceed forward and therefore be more helpful. Was that part of what was going on?
I'm looking at the proposed language right now. It says for number 5, if the planning commission finds that the application is lacking in some way, it says, I'm quoting now, I'm quoting the proposed language. It shall provide the applicant with written documentation identifying the provision or provisions and an explanation of the reason or reasons it considers the housing development to be inconsistent, not in compliance, or not in conformity. So it'd be someone would be appointed from the planning commission to do that. To Commissioner Hutt's point, it can be via, the chair can do it, a subcommittee can be appointed to do it, and how you do it, I think there are a couple of ways of doing it. You can also, you can have an individual refer back to the recorded meeting and make sure that all the points are captured that were raised. You can, at the end of the meeting, you can do it collectively. You can summarize all the different points right before the meeting is concluded or that agenda item is concluded. So there's lots of ways to go about it. But yes, Commissioner Spears, the planning commission would have to identify those issues.
So could we come up with a format for the planning commission where we identify the issues and the recommendations as part of our discussion and minutes? In other words, if you see this, then this is what we see, and those can be then enumerated and voted on as part of the commission, and that would be part of the record?
Can you explain a little more how that would work?
So we get an applicant who has a house, and we go down and as we do now is we look at certain things and we say, what is it about this that we would like to see modified? And then if we enumerate those with the issues that we want to address and our recommendations for that, and then at the end of the discussion, we read those back with those and we vote on it, and it becomes a matter of record. Does that help fulfill the objectivity that is being looked for here? That the applicant gets very clear and precise directions and information? Because I think that has a possibility. Does that make sense?
I think you would definitely satisfy the language I just read to you. So, yeah.
Yeah, and Bob, just one of the things I've heard is as a complaint that goes along with that meets what you're talking about, because we do that anyway. We have a meeting, but we go around the table, and just as John says, and which underscores the problem, is that we see this live and we make a bunch of recommendations or we start talking about it. It ends up getting kind of thrown out there, and at the end we sort of hey, does the director, do you have that all down? And then, but we never enumerate them at the end of the meeting, and then they work with the client, and then they have to come back. If you're talking about enumerating them, then voting on it so that we approve a project subject to the things that we have already talked about, that would help, because I think one of the complaints I've heard is that people say, the commission throws all the stuff out. Nobody really has a good idea until they go back and talk to the director what's expected of them. Then they make the modifications, or in your case, sometimes they don't, and then we have to review the thing all over again. And sometimes opens up a can of worms to start the whole process all over again, rather than just moving forward and getting something approved. So I kind of agree with your concept, being able to enumerate it and get it done all in one session, if that's doable, because we essentially do that at our meetings. It's just that it gets passed on to the next meeting, because you never really hear a list of succinct things. If you do this, 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 and this, we'll approve the project. When we could say that at the meeting, and then we could approve it then and there, and then we wouldn't have to come back. They would just be working with the staff and to make sure those things got done.
There's a double-edged. I'm sorry, Bill, finish. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying one of the complaints I've heard is that dithers out the project process, and they never feel like they get a clear, concise feeling for what they're supposed to be doing. The client usually does at some point, but they end up having to come back, working with the director, making modifications, and then other times, sometimes we've taken almost a fresh look at it, like, well, yeah, that looks like everything we asked for, and then sometimes we come up with more, or something doesn't sound quite right, or we rethink what we asked them to do in the first place, and then sometimes we ask them to modify it again, and that just makes another meeting and another approval process. And what I've heard is that people complain that gets dragged out unnecessarily. I mean, I think we fixed a lot of that with the thresholds, which is great, because then less comes before us, and they work that out with the director and the planning and with the Department of Planning. But so I mean, you can play devil's advocate, but I just know that I think that would probably help the city council if we directed a process where whatever it was we do decide gets sort of decided upon at that meeting in a streamlined fashion.
Well,
I'd like to give you an analogy to that whole thing, okay? Based on my teaching experience, because it's very, very similar. And first of all, you're correct that that problems that are solved more neatly in preliminary fashion cause less trouble this way, at the commission. And so it really is on an educated staff to handle as much as they can. But when you're teaching and it first of all takes a lot of discipline, either as a teacher or a commissioner, that when the thing comes back a second time, that you are disciplined enough as a commission to address very, very specifically just what it was sent away for, and nothing else. And there have been in the past at times situations where commissioners have just from a design opinion kind of standpoint continued to go after the applicant. And that is something that we have to make sure that we discipline ourselves out of entirely, right? But now, on the other hand, there's two edges, there's double-edged kind of thing, because sometimes the applicant will go off and make changes, thinking they're making changes in response, but they're creating new problems. And then they really get annoyed when the commission's got a problem with that the second time around. Everything that can be handled neatly by staff beforehand, so much the better. Beyond that, it takes a lot of discipline on the part of the commissioners to keep that whole process running in a straight a line as they can.
Yeah. Commissioner Spears?
Yes. So I'd like to ask Director Gonzalez, can the current way that we run our meetings, I mean, I got to admit, is we try to be helpful and we try to improve the project and we try to come to some compromise. And in your executive summary, you do talk about sometimes the applicant is frustrated and sometimes the planning commission is frustrated. And so the effect of providing of being more disciplined in terms of enumerating what our concerns are and possible fixes would be of assistance to both the applicant and your office. Is that true?
It would, because we could get concurrence with the commission if we are enumerating the direction from the commission to the applicant at the meeting. The way the language is drafted, it is asking the chair to draft that language.
So, I mean, coming up with some kind of format for review in which our concerns are specifically spelled out and whatever recommendations we have and that we as a body would then all universally agree that these are our concerns. So they would have to, enough of us would have to share the concerns so that they would have a certain weight. I'm a little of a Pollyanna here, but I'm hoping that a process like that would appear more objective to people watching us, so that it may be more helpful and things would be would move more smoothly.
I would agree with that.
So it's not so much, it's a combination of 20-14 plus it's the process in which we inform the applicant and your office as to the concerns that we have with the application.
Yes.
Yeah, it's, you know, I think that the concept that we, in the meeting, produce a consensus report that we vote on is the way to go. I mean, it might make the meetings last longer, but then there's clear direction. I mean, one of the problems with having, you know, it happen afterwards is that maybe the person or who's not, the commissioner who's not on that subcommittee or the liaison or whatever says, hey, that's not what I meant, you know? Whereas if you agree to it in the meeting, it's clear, that's what we did. And maybe we can have, you know, a thing where on the screen that they get typed up right there and everyone can see what they are. I think that would be better. The other question I have is, you know, what ability do we have prior to meetings that wouldn't cause Brown Act violations? Like if one commissioner looks at the thing and says, well, these are my 7 tentative issues, could that be shared early so it's a public document so everyone can see? Because I just, again, I fear that the meeting is going to take a long time, and I'm trying to think of ways to expedite that process that doesn't, you know, run afoul of the open meeting law.
Yeah, that couldn't be shared to the entire that couldn't be shared with the entire commission before the meeting. It could be shared with like less than a quorum, but not the entire commission. That would violate the Brown Act.
Well, could we have, the other thing is maybe as part of this process is having like a commissioner on rotation who's like a project liaison commissioner who meets early on with the applicant and staff, you know, and talks about the different issues to try to help give them some thoughts about, you know, so but before it even gets to the commission, a lot of those like obvious issues are resolved.
I would recommend against it only because it might raise issues of bias. If the commissioner says up front, I have a problem with A, B, and C, they're not going to be a neutral arbitrator when the time comes to make that vote. So at least that's what the applicant could raise.
Yeah. See, there is, I mean, you try to streamline this stuff and then, but you're sort of hampered by the way the open meeting, and I'm not trying to knock the open meeting laws because I really think those are important. But it does put us in a bit of a box as to how we deal with this stuff. So, yeah.
Well, you know, there's maybe a similar kind of process. South Pasadena for historic preservation issues before that commission, before lockdown, they had a process that was called chair review, right? And what it was that the chair of the commission would come in to the office Monday after lunch, and it was first come, first served with an applicant or a potential applicant with questions of wanting to discuss, wanting to get oriented the correct way to their project, and it would be the chair and a staff person. Now, my experience there is that the staff person being a younger person and the chair being a much older, wizened professional, All right, and the two of them and the two of them talk together, and the staffer had benefit of what the professional had to say. And my experience is that I've gone in there, and even though I know the technicality of all their laws, the chair would be sharing with me how the city and how the commission is going to review something, and how it would best go forward. And you could have an extremely copacetic kind of discussion there with well, in my case, I'm sorry, but the chair is Mark Gallatin, and is somebody I've known for many years, and he's very, very expert in this field. And but we've had very copacetic kind of discussions, good understanding about what the direction would be that the city would want to see. The staffer would take notes, and I found that it's like extremely helpful to the project taking off in the right direction. So you know, where's there a possible violation in what they were doing, or was it just all around helpful? I mean, is there a legal, Alec, do you see a legal downside in what they were doing?
Honestly, Commissioner Catalano, I'd have to look at that more closely. So I can, if you'd like, I can look into it, but
I don't know if we want to go in this direction at all. I'm just saying that you had mentioned the potential difficulties, and you know, yeah, we have to look at it a lot more. I don't even know if any of the other people up here on my screen are the least bit interested in it. Okay, but it is one way to get a lot of basics pinned down, you know, early on.
I think that's what staff can do. Honestly, I don't see the value in it personally, but I mean, I don't know. That's kind of a policy decision for you all to determine.
Mm-hmm. In which case, if staff were really doing it, then there would be no legal issue involved in that. Is right? Yeah, and of course you see in South Pass coming to sit down on the with the chair for a chair review is a totally voluntary thing anyway, which may be part of why it's okay. You know, people are just coming in there about 1 o'clock and all sitting in the waiting area, and they're lining up, taking numbers, so to speak, right?
So is that something that we want to explore more, or do we have a direction to keep moving here?
I don't think we're going to get that tonight, are we?
Well, we have to.
Gotta do something.
Gotta do something.
Well, I think that if we're talking about alternate 5, which I think that we're talking about, I think to me, it's sort of a bigger issue about interacting with applicants and providing better and more clear and useful feedback. And I think that I really want more of that. I think that's something we should do. I think that at 9 o'clock at night for the first time is when we're just hearing varying opinions from the city attorney, that's not the time to be crafting actual code. But I do think that it's what if we put forth a recommendation to city council, I think one of the things we should include in that recommendation, and hopefully staff could convey this, is that I think we should revisit the subject in a more fulsome manner. And I think that should be, we should figure out a way that we can communicate at the meetings, clear written direction, and we should figure out a way that we can get an applicant early direction so that they don't spend a whole bunch of time doing designs that aren't going to go anywhere, and we're going to tell them to redo. And in my experience, I understand the city attorney's concept that staff could do that, but I can tell you in my experience in this city and in other cities, applicants have a way of just not listening to staff. I mean,
Hearing what they want to hear. Yeah.
yeah, I've heard, I've had clients say, I want to do X, Y, and Z, and staff is telling me that, this part won't get approved, but I just want to go ahead anyhow. And it's like, no, staff knows what they're talking about, but there is a certain ability of somebody outside staff to just sort of give a second opinion to say, no, that's not going to fly, or, hey, yeah, that's a good idea. Or the other thing is, when you talk about some of the discretionary items, well, I would do this if I could do this other thing, but I don't know if they'll go for this other thing. And sometimes it's useful to have a check on, yeah, I think that kind of thing will fly. It's like in the hillside area where we have the ability to move setbacks around a little bit on a number of the One Carter properties, they've come to us and we've said, look, this setback is not important. Like that one that was right up against the hill and there was a setback because of an easement, right? And it's like, that's not anybody's house. If you invade that setback, you'll make your project all the much better. And they said, that's great. And then they came back the next meeting and did it. But if they would have heard that earlier, and I have no doubt that staff told them that, but they didn't go down that path because they were afraid to, that if they would have got better direction earlier, it could have saved everybody a whole bunch of time, including the applicant. So I would like to, as far as alternate 5, recommend to the city council that this issue be reconsidered. And to me, it's an add-on. I don't see why it would have to go with our recommendation tonight. We could revisit it, get all the information, have the city attorney do proper diligence instead of, asking him questions to opine off the cuff. And then we can structure something that I think would be really helpful. But I think that's an area that we really could improve the code on.
I want to see I want to see us leave here tonight with the 20-14 part of that affirmatively upheld, and then whatever we want to add on to it. But I want to see it mixed up with -16 or anything like that. We have to look. How we handle things early on is very, very important. Many years ago when Pacific Bell was still around, and I was working for a downtown firm when I first got here, and I was a project architect for a 13-acre, very, very complex field operating center down in South Bay. And the planning director just said to me, our first meeting, look, you and I are going to have to come to agreement about how to handle all of this, because if you and I can't come to agreement and Pacific Bell wants to go to the planning commission, you're not agreeing with me, you're dead. All right. You never, she was just very, very blunt about it. But then as we started working together, there wasn't any problem. Everything got worked out fine. But she was just very, very clear up front that, we've got to work this out right now. All right. Before you go to the commission.
Okay. So with that in mind, working out 20-14, I haven't heard anybody definitively recommend an alternative other than putting forth 20-14. Have I correctly identified the consensus here?
Yeah, think so.
All right, so then the only thing that changed from this version, from the last version, was that we updated those thresholds from 80 to 90 and 90 to 95. Is there any more discussion on those threshold levels or anything else in 20-14.
What are we going to do about alternative 5 then?
I think the consensus was that we recommend to the city council that they direct us to enact that as an add-on to 20-14.
Okay, but the details of it will be, or the specifics of it, I should say, will be as they've been written.
No, the specifics of it are that they will tell us that we should consider that, and that the deputy city attorney will have time to consider the legal options on it and give us a succinct presentation so we know what our options are and what they aren't, and then come back with a follow-on recommendation to council as to how to implement that. That was my understanding of what we talked about. Is that right, Commissioner Hutt?
That's what I would prefer, and I think it can include recommendations at meetings and before, and talk about the whole gamut. That would be even preferable.
Can that all be transmitted as part of what we blessed tonight?
I think that the idea that we are more disciplined in what we specifically ask of the applicant would present a more, quote, objective feedback, and would be more helpful, and it's possible, I don't know, it may address the issues brought up by the city council.
I think that the discipline, our being willing to look at the disciplines of this will get us a lot of mileage. It'll do an awful lot of good.
I think that it might be helpful if staff came up with some kind of form or some kind of process where the planning commission follows through on, what they recommend, and, so that it can be enumerated, and perhaps the assistant city attorney can weigh in on exactly how it gets voted and, what format that takes. But at least at the end of the day, everyone in the room walks away with a concise list of what our concerns were, so that there can be no confusion. And, we stand by, these. And it's not, because currently we make recommendations and we talk about some things, and the applicant does at times pick and choose what they want to hear and what they don't want to hear. And
how about that?
Yeah, so I think it's more of a change of process than it is of other things, and maybe that process will help us do a better job.
Yeah. Hey, I got a question along those lines for Vincent.
Yes.
And that is, the city's consulting civil engineer, Kev. Do you have a sense of how often he is around City Hall? How much he's just there to input?
He will come in at least twice a week to see if he has anything that needs to be reviewed, and at which time we do raise issues to him, looking at plans that have been submitted. More often than not, they would be those that are just going straight through plan check.
Yeah, there've been things that have come to the commission in the past that I'm pretty sure that I'm starting to sound like a broken record here. Kev could have shortstopped beforehand and say, no, just go back and do X, Y, and Z. All right, before you go to the commission. He's pretty savvy. He's a pretty savvy guy. If we could involve him in this process we're talking about, it would be very helpful.
We have asked for more professional plans, have we not? Wasn't that part of what our process is?
Have we required them for everything? I mean, where we have where we have so far required or asked for a licensed architect, an architect putting his stamp on a set of drawings, he should either know that he has the ability to, that he has handled himself the issues like grading and so forth, right? Or that he knows that he or she should have brought in a civil engineer at that point already. But when I go to a site and I see there's 5 or 6 feet of fall across one residential site, and the guy has drawn the thing on with the building sitting on a flat line, give me a break. That should never have even come to the commission.
Well, Director Gonzalez, we have put in for more specific and professional drawings, yes?
For one of the recommendations by staff, we have that specifically asking for a licensed architect. Some of the commissions, Commissioner Hutt, I don't recall if we put in that language requiring a licensed architect.
I think the current draft, as we put forth, is only for those that require finding 8. So the houses 3,500 square feet and above. But for smaller ones or administrative review process, we didn't require that.
Right.
Now, that's just one of the ways that you can catch things. It's a real tacky issue when the state licensing requirements allow exempt allow exempt projects and do not require a licensed architect but a designer, some of whom are on their way to licensure. Some of whom are just old hacks that have no intention of ever getting licensed, but they learned how to draw. Okay, big deal.
Are you recommending a change to the proposal that we have of licensed architects being required over 3,500 square feet?
I think we got to leave it right. We got to leave it right now. But some of the things we're talking about down the line, maybe we have to look at it a little more carefully and consider whether staff should be passing all of those by Kev to begin with.
Well, certainly with this modification in option 5, one of our findings could be that we would want the applicant to come back with the drawings from a licensed architect, because we find that there is too much that we don't understand about the current application. And that would
and if it's a smaller job, even somebody who isn't licensed, who's competent, is going to know when they've got to get a surveyor out there and get and get their gradients or whatever.
So are we recommending a change to the level as proposed or not?
I think that if we keep in mind that when the documented feedback that we give to the applicant could include, we want them to come back with drawings that are stamped and are more professional, then that would fulfill that requirement. That would fulfill our concerns, and we would get what we would want. Hopefully that they would do that beforehand and save themselves a trip to the Planning Commission. But at this point in time, we're under the gun to move forward. And
and if they're just stamped by a civil engineer and the grading information is all properly reflected on that, I don't particularly care if they legally can do an exempt project, but the exempt guy has been smart enough to go and hire a civil engineer and they got the grading stuff right. Cool, great, I don't care.
I'm not sure at the conceptual level if we could, and if an architect would want to stamp a conceptual plan that's going to be constantly changing. Would that be typical practice?
How much do you think the dirt is going to be changing? Their design may be changing, but the hillside that they're trying to dig into is not.
I think for purposes of tonight, I don't recommend we make a change. I think as Commissioner Spears was mentioning, that is part of the consideration of the findings, and also perhaps part of the consideration of the earlier review. We can consider options there, but I don't recommend we make a change tonight on what we have. I think that's an issue for a later modification.
Perfect. So currently where I have us, and please, let's get a consensus check here, is favoring alternative 5, which is the 20-14 resolution as written, as well as recommendation that the city council have us put together for their consideration a feedback loop to the applicant that is more comprehensive, so that that real-time feedback is given to them.
Would you like a motion on that?
I'd like some discussion to make sure that that's.
I agree. I just want to clarify that we're not recommending the specific language listed on the staff packet on page 18 with
Oh, what a time for internet fun. So I think what I heard him say is we're going to go with alternate 4, not alternate 5, but we're going to add a recommendation that there be direction from city council for us to come up with a feedback loop, so that feedback is given to the applicant at the time of being in front of the commission, rather than having to seek that elsewhere or after the fact. Is that what I'm hearing?
Very eloquently stated. I would so move.
All right. Maybe we can get a little discussion before we so move that, to make sure that we have consensus, because we've spoken about quite a few different things. And I see some looks of interrogation here. So
Come on, guys. How much more are we going to talk about this?
Also, I don't think we've opened up this item to public comment yet, have we?
No.
Okay.
we haven't, and I don't, and do we need to come up with what our, okay, when should we open up public comment?
Well, I mean, before we make the motion, for sure.
Outstanding. At this time,
All right.
we will switch back to public comment. Thank you, Ms. Lynn. At this time, any
Well,
person
she's been listening.
Planning Commission concerning this specific agenda item, the commission welcomes your participation. When addressing the commission, please begin by providing your name and address for the record. Please keep comments to no more than 5 minutes to assure an orderly and timely meeting. No actions or discussions? Nope, that doesn't apply here. All right, we will give people a minute to dial in and share comments. Do we have anybody waiting for public comment?
It does not appear you have any callers with comments.
All right, maybe we'll just give 30 seconds longer here. How are people doing? Do we need a quick break before we come back and summarize, or is everybody okay to keep going?
I think we're okay to keep going.
Great. All right, we will bring it back to the commission at this time. If anybody does dial in, please go ahead and let us know and put them through.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So Commissioner Spears, you looked as if you had some comments.
No, I'm okay.
2014 with that recommendation is what you're,
Yeah, I think that 2014 with a process that we can give the applicant specific recommendations. And quite honestly, it may save them a lot of money, because if we can enumerate them well enough, then the follow-up can be done by staff and they don't need to come back to us.
Commissioner Dallas, any comments?
I like what Commissioner Spears just said, especially if the follow-up can be done by staff. And I just add that the commissioner's comments and recommendations should be in writing. I don't think that was made clear. So.
Okay. Commissioner Hutt, comments?
Yeah, I agree with that. I did want to just question the, did we want to go over the memo that explains the revisions, or are we all good with those? I assume that as part of the resolution making the changes, we're going to send this recommendation with regard to alternate 5, and then we're also going to send the memo explaining what the code revisions do and what they're for.
Staff will include that memo with the city council agenda report.
Okay.
Yeah. So I guess the first thing would be we've got to clear these up one at a time, I think, before we can take the motion. So from 20-14 with the recommendation, you're good with that, Commissioner Hutt?
Yes.
Any more comments on that, rather?
Nope.
Okay. Commissioner Pevs, I'm sorry, Deputy City Attorney, did you have something to add?
Yeah, Chair, if you could, just for staff's benefit, because we're going to send this recommendation up to the city council, in your resolution, what exactly would you like it to say with respect to the direction that you're going to provide to the applicant?
I was hopeful that you were going to skip over that. Your attention to detail is unmatched. Yeah, we can work on that. Let's make sure that we're all on the same page first. Commissioner Pevsner, did you have any comments on the path forward?
Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm in agreement.
Vice Chair Catalano.
What will be our opportunity to work on these additional items per your exchange with the city attorney just a minute ago?
Well, once we've determined that we have consensus on this being the path forward, then we would take the time to draft what the recommended content is.
What I do.
Okay. You asked the question?
The question is, do you have
Chair.
any more conversation?
I'm in.
You're in. Okay. It sounds like we have consensus on the path forward. So then drafting the path forward, I think what I said, I'm going to write this down as we talk so that we can all wordsmith it together. And then maybe if you guys can set me up to share, we can do this real time.
I don't have.
Looks like
resolution
Claire
on
or Oscar can set me up.
desktop, so if you have the agenda report, the packet, somebody can, I'm allowing people to have multiple, allowing multiple people to share. So if somebody had the.
Oh, so I
packet,
can go ahead and share this. Never mind.
We can turn to attachment 3, PC Resolution 2014.
So this is the additional language that we need to draft about what the recommendation is. That was my understanding, that the Deputy City Attorney wanted us to draft the actual language. So we can start drafting this together here. So planning, I'll blow this up so you can read it easier. You'll have to tell me what words are not okay to use here, Deputy City Attorney. Mandates. Real-time. And review.
Just to be clear, this is going to go in the actual resolution itself.
Correct.
Yes.
So this will be section 3.
I think it would be a new section 3, general plan consistency would be 4 and CEQA 5.
Right. Okay.
Feedback.
Does this language capture what people are looking to express, and is it okay as worded per attorney?
Yeah, I would like to add the concept of optional early review to explore that concept. And I'm not saying if the city attorney says it's not going to work, that's fine, but I would like to explore that as well.
I would include that as a new section, I think.
I agree. I think it should be a separate section.
But that would just be in section 4.
Regarding, oh, let's finish.
It allows for the applicant to meet with,
Is it staff that we want them to meet with, or commission?
An appointed commissioner.
I think the advanced part, it doesn't need to be so specific. It should be early in the application process. Because the hope is that we help an applicant with their design concepts, not after they've already spent a lot of money going down a place that doesn't work. And then one suggested revision to both sections is, instead of adopt a resolution, I would say recommend code amendments. Because we're going to recommend to the city council.
All right, guys. Thank you, Gary. Take care. Thank you. All right, bye.
For the first one, maybe we say feedback of the commission to the applicant, just to clarify who's receiving this feedback.
Further minor thing, if you're going to have code amendments, that's plural, you mandate and allow instead of the plurals there.
On section 3, can we add something about staff being able to approve the recommendations of the commission? The possibility, staff being able to approve the project based on the recommendations of the commission?
Wouldn't that be something that we can refer to them at the time? So I don't know that it needs to be something that's explored. We can always refer them back to staff and say, staff, do you feel comfortable as long as they hit this criteria and going ahead and proving it? We do that today.
I guess it sells it better.
I'll buy that. Where do you want me to put it?
It would be in section 3, the next sentence, I think.
So you're saying adding a sentence to section 3?
Explaining that the follow-up, the ability of being approved at staff level.
So how about I'll allow the commission to authorize staff to follow up on the changes, because we don't want to give them.
Something like
there may be some changes that we want to keep. We want to see again.
10:30?
What? Your appointment is 10:30.
It opens up at 10:30.
Yeah, to be clear, we would have to change the code then, because the planning commission can't delegate its authority to approve a project to the staff.
Oh.
Okay.
So that would be a code amendment.
Yeah, I mean, the way we would do this is we would approve the project subject to conditions of approval. So we already have that capability. Right. But we have to actually approve it then when we give it to them.
Right.
We're not always approving, we're advising. We're often in the position of advising. And, most of what we'll be advising on is kind of like basics that all the commissioners would agree on.
So are you recommending an edit somewhere?
No,
If I revise that, Sam's again, I'm gonna get it.
Yeah, but don't
just
be
to a comment I heard.
stuff that I bought.
No, it wasn't.
Dude, that other stuff is the butcher box stuff is amazing. Don't put this out. This is good.
Troublemaker. Fucking crap.
Mr. Pevsner, you might want to mute the mic.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
we can hear everybody.
and Sharon.
Hi, Sharon. All right. Are there any other recommended changes?
Do we need to include in the resolution a reference to the memo?
Where staff can include the memo as part of the staff report. We can just attach it. So if you'd like, you can. It wouldn't make a difference. I mean, I don't think it'd make a difference. We can just attach it to the staff
If
report.
we don't need to, then I don't want to. I just,
yeah,
that's fine.
Let's make it simple.
Yep.
We're all happy with this?
Yes.
On number 3, where you say towards the last sentence, allowing where applicable, the referral of approval subject to more specific findings. Do you want to say conditions of approval instead of findings?
Allowing where applicable, conditional.
How about we say allowing where applicable, the approval of the project subject to specific conditions of approval.
Boy, it's getting late.
Is that what you were thinking, Commissioner Hutt?
I mean, I think the approval has to be, generally we approve things subject to conditions, not to additional findings.
Right.
The findings are made beforehand, before the
I'm on
approval, so.
of specific conditions. Just change the last word to conditions.
Any other recommended changes?
No.
All right. I will email these to you, Director Gonzalez. All right, so I guess what I'm hearing is, since the memo is going to be attached separately, should we review the memo first before in case there's any changes we make after the memo? I guess we don't want to make a motion, so we should review the memo. Should we bring up the red line, or did anybody have any specific things they wanted to talk about on it? Fantastic.
For it, I have a lot of things open in here.
Oh, I have it. I can share it if you want.
Okay.
You can see the red line memo?
Yes.
Great. So maybe we can just run through and accept changes where we like them. Everybody okay with the date changing?
Yep.
Generally making residential development review. Okay. Changing it to the full planning commission because we're reviewing it now publicly. So any objections to these changes?
I'm good.
Get it done.
If you don't speak up, I'm just going to keep going through.
You're good.
Scroll.
You're good.
And just a clarification on the number down below, that was just a typo. That it should be 27 instead of 25.
Okay.
And then the next bit was that where I said we had specific references to staff findings at one point, but because those have all moved around, we took those out.
Okay.
And then that bit is to do with the threshold, the 2,500 square foot that we put in at the last meeting.
That's good.
Yep.
That's good.
Keep rolling.
I got to say, this is making for scintillating TV.
Our ratings have never been higher.
Somehow I feel like I've seen this before.
Yeah.
It's an old show.
Typo?
That's fine. Yeah, that's a good change.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, that goes.
Should this be left? No.
So we changed the chapter reference there because we added the other thing about the multiple applications.
Gotcha.
And E was the thing that we decided that was the city attorney's advice was too dicey to include, as it looked too much like a finding.
So you're jumping from D to G there?
So G has to become E.
No. Those are references to the code sections we changed.
Got it. Okay, sorry.
So they're out of order because they're referring to items that were.
Bureaucrats.
Yeah, that's good.
All right.
That's it.
All right. So I think basically we just accepted all the changes, so the clean version is good.
Yeah, and I think just to echo, this was meant to be more of a in the weeds, detailed discussion of the changes and what they accomplish, not to be a persuasive opinion piece about why we went this direction as opposed to changing the findings themselves. And I think that to the extent people want to express that to the city council, that, obviously we've done that in this meeting tonight, but they can also, commissioners can write emails or letters or attend the meeting and comment there. And I think that's probably a better vehicle to send that message than through some memo like that.
All right. I guess that brings us to the magic time. Do we have a motion to, I'm sorry, first, is there any other conversation about any of the various topics that we have discussed so far? Hearing none, I will ask if there is a motion.
I will move that we adopt Planning Commission Resolution 2014 with the amendments noted and direct staff to forward the explaining memo to the City Council.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That was an aye, Commissioner Pevsner? Okay. All right. Motion carries. Let me look back to our agenda and see what is next. Planning Commission reports.
I only want to thank you, Tom, for this. This could have been a really tacky meeting, man. You did a beautiful job running the whole thing. Great job tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're still up next. Planning and Community Preservation staff reports.
Well, first, I'd like to mention that I thank you for all your work on this effort. I think we've been pretty busy over the last many months addressing many of the topics that council has directed us to update: commercial code, parking code, design review findings, or streamlining the design review process. Many of these items are moving forward to City Council on October 27th. It's also going to be another outdoor live meeting in Memorial Park. And those 3 items will be on the agenda. For our Planning Commission meeting of November 5th, we returned to projects that just happened to work out. We had a lull in having some projects that were submitted and deemed complete, but we have 3 projects that we're going to be reviewing at the November 5th meeting. That concludes my report.
3 projects. And this,
Wow.
none of what we've done on design review would be applicable to anybody, even after it becomes code, whatever the city council elects to be that code. Nothing would be subject to the new finding or to the new codes if they are already in the process. Is that correct?
That's correct. It would be council's decision or determination to say that maybe the current caseload is, will retain the same findings and same process for a period of 6 months, whatever they determine.
Okay. Anything else for us, Director Gonzalez?
That's it.
Well, I certainly want to echo the thanks. Staff has been incredible at pulling data for us, taking revisions of the code and listening to our rants and raves, and I certainly appreciate that, all that you've done. So with that, we will adjourn to our next meeting on November 5th. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much. Have a good evening.
Good night.